You know, the older I get, the more I realize something. Christmas in the 80s didn't just feel bigger, it was bigger. It was brighter, louder, more magical, and fueled by the one thing that defined an entire generation besides movies, and that was the toys. The Sears wish book would hit the mailbox, toy commercials took over every cartoon we watched on Saturday mornings, and December felt like this magical countdown to the greatest day of the year. The day Santa, our mom, dad, or the lucky trip to Toys R Us delivered to us that one toy you had been thinking about for months and months. So today, we're going back to the mall, back to the Christmas tree, back to the carpet on that magic Christmas morning, and we're looking at the biggest, most iconic, most Christmas-defining toys of the entire 1980s. Not ranked, just remembered. Because if you grew up in that decade, these weren't just toys, they were childhood, they were Christmas. So let's dive in, pop that tape in, I got you, let's go do this. All right, so the toys that defined Christmas, the toys that built us in the 1980s, and you can't start a list like this without recognizing that even though I'm a guy and I didn't want one of these, Cabbage Patch Kids were everywhere. If you lived in the early 80s, you remember that chaos. Cabbage Patch Kids weren't just toys, they were a phenomenon. Parents were fighting in stores, climbing over each other, calling hotlines to track down shipments. Every kid wanted their adoption certificate. No toy in the decade maybe created more Christmas hysteria than Cabbage Patch Kids. This was peak 80s consumer madness, and honestly, it became a peak of holiday magic too. Cabbage Patch Kids had to be on the list. But for me, around the mid-80s, 1985, I had a few other things that might be on this list, but one of the big things was the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. The NES wasn't just a Christmas gift, it changed childhood. Like, there's a whole movie that was made about this 8-bit Christmas pretty much. And if you woke up with that Mario and Duck Hunt bundle under your tree, you were basically a celebrity at school on Monday when it went back. It turned our living rooms into arcades, the things that we used to love going to, still did after this. But it launched the era of staying up all night and playing video games while, the rest of the family did their own thing. Now, we had an Atari too, and it did that, but the NES gets credit for elevating it all. Christmas and Nintendo in the mid-early 80s are forever linked. Now, another one that I had, and it's kind of creepy when you look back on it, and there's a movie that's loosely based on this, Ted, but it's the Teddy Ruxpin, the talking bear, and it felt like pure sorcery. Now, you had to pop a tape in the back, but in 1985, trust me, if you had a Teddy Ruxpin and a couple of story tapes, you had the closest thing the decade ever saw to an animatronic magic in your bedroom. He was warm, cuddly, and slightly terrifying when you look back at it, and he was everywhere. Teddy was one of the most popular must-have Christmas toys of the mid-decade, and I was right there wanting one. A Teddy Ruxpin had to be here. Now, another one, and I had a lot of these, and boy, do I wish I still had some of them, is Transformers More Than Meets the Eye. This was the moment when TV and toys fused into a turbocharged marketing machine. There's some others on this list, don't you worry, that did that too. But Optimus Prime, he became the Christmas holy grail of 1984. I know, I wanted him. My brother wanted him, and when you tore open that box and you figured out how to actually transform the truck into a robot, you had ascended in the 80s. I promise you. Transformers were more than meets the eye. And more, once that gets in my head, it's there. And that's the power of them. And it was more than most parents could afford, to be honest with you. They were expensive. And when the playsets hit and all this stuff, and go try to buy yourself an original Gen 1 Optimus Prime today. Good luck. May the odds be forever in your favor. Now, you can't talk toys and cartoons and like sort of marketing genius without talking about He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. They created the toys before the cartoon in this case. He-Man absolutely ruled the aisles from about 82 to 86. My brother and I got the Castle Grayskull and Battle Cat, and you had Skeletor, and like you wanted them all. And I remember seeing that Castle Grayskull under the tree. Man, that was next level. I think that year my brother and I got Castle Grayskull, some He-Man figures, like we got Battle Cat, He-Man, and Skeletor, and we got some G.I. Joes and a go-kart. And it was like the biggest Christmas that we ever remember right there. And some Star Wars. Got the X-Wing fighter that year too. We'll get to that in a minute. But Castle Grayskull, Battle Cat, all of those, and I always liked him as Cringer. But I told my daughter I'm going to call her Cringer now. She's got a new nickname, which is an inside joke, and I had to show her who Cringer was. But Christmas morning in the 80s looked like a battlefield all the time, between Star Wars, G.I. Joe, He-Man, Transformers, and nobody did the big, bold, like muscle, sword and sorcery and sandal epic quite like He-Man. I have the power. And if you got these toys, you had the power, and they still have power today. Now, another one that was huge that I got it, this one wasn't for me, but My Little Pony was everywhere. Bright colors, brushable hair, endless characters. It dominated Christmas for a lot of kids, mostly girls. I didn't have a sister growing up, so like my Aunt Frances probably had some of these as we're close in age. But between the cartoon and the commercials and the giant ponies, they were on every store end cap. They are one of the definitive toys of the 80s. There is no doubt about that. But when you talk big time definitive toys of the 1980s, we have to talk G.I. Joe, a real American hero. Look, if Transformers and He-Man were hot gifts, G.I. Joe was a volcano. It was next level. The figures, the vehicles, the bases, and yes, that 7.5 foot, 8 foot long USS flag aircraft carrier, the toy that only one rich kid in every school maybe actually had, because we didn't get it. I told Risha, this is like my 40th anniversary of not getting that aircraft carrier, and she went and looked, and getting one could cost you anywhere between $5,000 and $40,000 today, and it might as well have been that much back then, because you wasn't getting it unless you were rich. But man, that was the thing of dreams. And G.I. Joe fighting Cobra and Destro, fighting to save the day. He never gives up. Okay, I'm not going to do it, but he'll stay till the fight's won. I'll tell you that. And G.I. Joe Christmas mornings were full-scale military operations, and those commercials that made it look like it was all out in the jungle, it made stuff the coolest ever in very unrealistic play circumstances. But they treated those commercials like little mini movies, I'm telling you, and that was part of it. And G.I. Joe was a big part of the 1980s. Now, another one that I wasn't into personally, but the Care Bears were big time. Soft and colorful and basically everywhere. They were everywhere. Care Bears had some big holiday plush sales. That was the plushie that you had to have. So between like the TV specials, the movies, the toys, they were Christmas staples for kids who wanted the comfort over the chaos. So Care Bears definitely on this list. And one that came out a little bit earlier but really exploded in the 1980s was Light-Brites. Like, yes, it came out a little earlier. Now, I'm very, like, I could remember the early 80s, so, like, I remember this, but, like, it really took off in the 80s. We had them everywhere. The Light-Brites were, like, the commercials for these things were hypnotic. It was kids, gently tapping down the plastic pegs on the black backboard with the backlighting, creating like Christmas trees and snowmen and all that stuff. And it was cool. They're still super cool to me today. Light-Brite wasn't just a toy. It was art. So like I was into art, and you had that like 15, 20 watt light bulb back there, tiny, but it was art that you created, and it was super cool, and Light-Brites were everywhere. Another thing that was everywhere, I got to be honest, I wanted one of these because I couldn't have a puppy at the time. My parents had dogs, and I wanted my own puppy. I really wanted an English Bulldog. I wanted one my whole life. I finally got one when I was grown, and he was the best dog I ever had, Champ. And he was with me a long time. But back then, it was the pound puppies. These were the perfect, like, this was a stand-in for my dog. Every puppy came with an adoption certificate, which made it feel very special and emotional. I still have my pound puppy to this day, and I'm headed towards 50, and I still got my pound puppy. But tons of colors, characters, a massive demand for these things. Pound puppies were ubiquitous, and they had to be on this list. Now, another one that some people forget unless you were there. Now, 80s were huge with wrestling. Hulk Hogan, one of my all-time heroes. I mean, just seeing him do everything. But the LJN WWF Wrestling Superstars. That was the big rubber characters, and I meant to go get them out of my attic because I have some still. I have like 7 or 8 of them. I meant to go get them before the video, but I forgot. These were a very underestimated toy of the 80s, and we had all of them. They had a WWF wrestling ring. They were huge, rubber, like stiff. They had like, we had Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant and Hillbilly Jim and Junkyard Dog and Rowdy Roddy Piper and Jake the Snake Roberts. All of these guys that were our favorites. These figures were everywhere, and a lot of people forget about them. Kids recreated, like we did all the time, the Hogan versus Andre match. We had Macho Man, because you can't have anything without the Macho Man. Oh, yeah. And you would do that. You drop your elbows on each other off the couch, cut promos in the mirror. These figures were heavy, tough, pure 80s energy. They last forever. I still have some. Greg the Hammer Valentine I even have. And they flew off the shelves every December. What you gonna do, brother, when the WWF Wrestling Superstars run wild on you? They ran wild in the 80s, and I absolutely loved them. Now, another one, and this is a cartoon that I love, and was secretly kind of scary, and I really wish they would make a live action movie out of and make it like for adults, because this one had some serious creepy underneath content, and I'm talking about Thundercats. Ho! The cartoon was huge, but man, the toy line, Lion-O and Mum-Ra. Man, the Thundercats were super cool. Of course, Chitara. Man, they were big, chunky, powerful toys that you wanted, and the Sword of Omens out there under your Christmas tree, and you had the Lion-O sleeve here. If you got that, man, you won Christmas. There's so much potential for this franchise, this cartoon, to be a movie and be like a PG-13 to R-rated. Mum-Ra could be legit scary as a villain in a live-action movie. Thundercats are awesome. You got to have them. They were huge in the 80s. Now, another one that I mentioned earlier, the 70s really carried into the first few years of the 80s. The 80s carried into the first few years of the 90s, and the 90s carried on to about 2002, 2004. But those were like the last decades that really bled over. It doesn't do that anymore. There's not an identity per decade anymore like there used to be. And one of the things that carried over into the 80s. It really got popular in the early 80s, that you heard coming out, in the late 70s. It was coming, all this. But in the early 80s, before Nintendo's takeover, Atari was Christmas gaming. The 2600, the 7800, Space Invaders, Pitfall, Frogger, Asteroids. We even had Lost Luggage playing. You got a little dude running back and forth trying to catch the luggage that's falling out of the plane. These games were huge. Of course, Pac-Man and stuff later. And let's not forget the horrible, rushed E.T. Atari game that we had, where it's just E.T. wandering around as a dot. It was bad, but man, did you want it. And the commercial for E.T. totally sold it, the Christmas commercial. But even in 85, 86, when the Nintendo came out, Atari was still a staple. Trust me. We had that for a long time, especially for those families that couldn't afford to or weren't ready to jump into Nintendo yet. Atari is legendary. I love it. I could sit here probably and play Pitfall and Frogger and Pac-Man and all that stuff all day long if you wanted to. But Atari everywhere. It really helped build the 80s. Now, another one that's kind of sneaky is, it had a cartoon as well, but this one had a little bit of early, anime really influence, and I'm not a big anime guy, but Voltron? Voltron may have been one of the coolest toys of the decade. The lions combined. And every kid wanted that futuristic robot, anime-inspired mega robot, like some sort of giant samurai gaiju. This thing for Christmas, Voltron, and we had them, man. So we were cool. Voltron wasn't just a toy. It was a rite of passage. I really dig Voltron. It was super cool back in the day. I think a lot of these kids today that are really into anime and stuff, if they went back and watched Voltron, they'd be hooked 100%. Now, another one that carried over from the 70s but really hit its boom in the 80s was Hot Wheels. Hot Wheels cars, the brand is older for sure, but the track sets really took off in the 80s, and they were something else where you could set up your track and run your Hot Wheels cars, the loop-de-loops, the stunt kits, the boosters. Christmas morning meant building racetracks. Now, another thing I didn't mention on this was the old electric racetracks, like the slot racers. Those were big in the 70s, but they still carried on to the 80s. We had those too, and this was kind of like a cross between that and Hot Wheels. Just legendary, but really hit a boom in the 80s. And kind of tied into that was the Micro Machines. The tiny cars were everywhere, and you had the fast-talking guy on the commercials that, hey, my Micro Machine. I can't talk that fast, but you know who I'm talking about. If you were there, they were iconic. The commercials were iconic, and I think we just called him the fast-talking Micro Machines guy. I can't really remember his name, but the play sets, all that stuff, these things would sell out. They were huge sellers every December, a big part of the 80s. And then there are some toys that some of us po folks had that we loved, like the little Viewmaster. You put these little round cards with pictures into the top, and you look through it like binoculars, and you click this thing, and you could see these whole worlds in 3D, like Disney or Star Wars or nature or space or whatever. They had them. Just simple, classic, timeless, kind of the same as the Rubik's Cube that was huge in the time. That really wasn't on this list because it kind of goes without saying. But yeah, the Viewmasters, super cool and a big part. A lot of people probably still have these laying around their attics and stuff like that because they were so ubiquitous. They were everywhere. Now, another thing that is this was for older kids, kind of a toy, kind of a thing that you had to have, was the Sony Walkman. It is inseparable from the 80s. This wasn't just a toy. It was like going from a kid to a teenager, grown-up lifestyle sort of upgrade. Getting a Walkman for Christmas immediately made you feel older, feel cooler, feel more independent, like suddenly you had your own soundtrack. And of course, James Gunn's trying to capture this all the time in DC, but it was there. It was real. And whether it was the cassettes, you could have been playing Michael Jackson, Bon Jovi, Run DMC, whatever your first mixtape was, the Walkman defined what a big Christmas gift really looked like, especially when you were turning that page from being a little kid to a teenager. Hell, I would still get a Walkman today. Like, I don't care if it's got a cord or not. I just think it's cool, and it was a big part. Of course, I had countless ones over the years back then, but the Walkman in the 80s, synonymous. And if you got one on Christmas morning, you were legit, bro. And finally, listen, you can't do an 80s list without Star Wars. From 80 to 85, even though the original trilogy ended like 83 or 84, whatever it was, with Return of the Jedi, the toys kept the universe alive and just boomed throughout the early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s. And then later on with the prequels, guess what, y'all? Toys again. I still have all of these, right, from the prequels. There's Darth Maul, unopened. Originally when it came out. So that thing's been here for 26, 27 years, whenever that came out. The figures, the vehicles, Jabba's playset. I mean, if you had that, and of course I had an X-Wing fighter, and I'm still a big kid. I saw an X-Wing fighter desk lamp yesterday at the store, and I had to stop myself from buying it because I have nowhere to put it on my desk. But it just immediately hit all of that. And Star Wars might, because of that, be the single most important toy line of the early 80s. Christmas mornings were packed with Hoth playsets and X-Wing fighters and the figures, Darth Vader in the carrying case, all that kind of stuff. They were huge. Star Wars is a part of our culture. It is part of the legacy of Americana. Everything. It is part of our modern mythology that we share, and it cannot be taken away. It is there, it is in the history books, and it is part of us, and it was a huge part of the 1980s. So there you have it. Not a ranked list, because this is not a competition. It's just a trip back to Christmas in a decade when toys ruled Christmas morning. The 80s gave us the biggest toy crazes, the wildest commercials, the greatest Saturday morning cartoon tie-ins when you're eating your cereal, and the most unforgettable Christmas mornings of our childhood. Back then, toys weren't digital, they weren't downloaded, they weren't hidden behind apps and algorithms. They were plastic, they were rubber, they were soft plushies, they were loud and insanely creative, with commercials that are more cinematic than 99% of the movies we see today, and they lit up our imaginations in ways nothing else ever has. If you had one of these toys under your tree, you didn't just get a present, you got a memory that stayed with you for life. Merry Christmas. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know which one is your favorite of the decade, and I hope that you have a great Christmas. We have a few more Christmas videos to go between now and the big day. Soak it all in, make more memories, and enjoy it. And that's what I got for you this time. If you enjoy this, of course, we do movies most of the time here, pop culture, deep dive, essays, all that kind of stuff, filmmaking. All of that is here. It's all part of our shared pop culture, and we are keeping it alive. And if that is for you, like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. If you want to support what we're doing here, you can join my Patreon. The link is below. You'll get your name and lights on every video, behind the scenes looks at my filmmaking, special members only videos, physical media deep dives, hauls, 4K reviews, all of that stuff, and everything goes right here back into the channel, and I really do appreciate it. But until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. Merry Christmas. I know.